First speaker, Barry Brown. He's a professor at the University of Copenhagen. Barry is a sociologist. He has a long history of doing ethnographic observational studies of a wide variety of topics in HCI, computer-supported cooperative work, ubiquitous computing, autonomous driving, and robots as well. So, Barry.
Hi, everybody. I woke up this morning and I felt very old. And that introduction also made me feel very old. But when I was young, I did much more fun work. Actually, throughout my career, I am a sociologist, but I'm actually a computer scientist as well. And I've done a lot of work over the years, bouncing back and forth. Worked in industry, worked at Hewlett-Packard, worked at Microsoft, worked on various kind of appliances, but I've also kind of very much tried to kind of keep core to my... Oh, it's a bit higher, does it? Like this? Is that better? Yeah. Is it? And I've tried to keep a bit core to my my sociological interests here, and that's actually a little bit what I'm going to try and do today, is try and bring a little bit of sociology, mix it with a little bit of robots. So I mentioned I do a lot of work with video. Sociologists, we love our research methods. And my research method has always just been pretty simple. If you love something, stick a camera on it. And I just stick a camera on it and see what happens in lots of weird places. But I want to start with possibly one of the most famous robots of all time. This is a recreation of quite a famous chess-playing robot that's known as the Mechanical Turk. Many of you might have heard this story, but in the 18th and the 19th century, this was a complete sensation. It was a robot that could play chess. And it actually played against some of the kind of most famous people of the 18th and 19th century and pretty much bet them all. Throughout all that time, it was a bit of a mystery. How did it work? Was there someone inside it? Was it some kind of clever clockwork thing? And actually, there was a fire in the storage room it was in, and for a long time it was thought that the actual mystery of the Mechanical Turk had been lost to time, and we'd never know. But it turned out, that even though there was this fire that destroyed the actual original Mechanical Turk, through the accounts of people who were involved in it, it was purchased and went on and even actually played against people like Napoleon. We do actually know now how it worked. And it was, of course, as you'd imagine, they weren't building chess-building robots back then. It was a fraud. How did it actually work? I've got no idea how to turn this pointer off, by the way. Maybe if I push that, but no, I'm not going to risk it. I'm just going to do that. So, this is how the Mechanical Turk worked. There was actually someone inside it, like this. And they actually kind of squashed themselves in there. And they could kind of operate the movement of the chess pieces from, the movement of the figurine, the robot, through this little control hatch here. And when it was actually demonstrated, before it was actually used, they could kind of move themselves between different parts of this kind of contraption. So you would look inside and you'd see the clockwork, and you'd be like, "Oh, this is amazing! It's this amazing robot." And then they could actually slide back, and they could actually see what was going on through this little mechanism here. And they could actually go on and kind of control the hands of the robot, and then from that actually play chess. And it was actually it was a kind of fairly gifted sequence of chess players who used the Mechanical Turk and demonstrated it. So even though it was beating all these famous people, it turned out that they actually weren't that good at chess. And so that was... We want to believe in robots, and I think it's important that we stop, and we're sometimes we have to be a little bit critical of what is going on, because most robots follow very simple programs and patterns. And indeed, often a lot of the time, our robots are actually controlled remotely by people. They usually only work in very constrained environments. And if you work with robots over any period of time, you come to know that they really actually, whenever they actually accomplish something, often it's because the people around them are doing a lot of the work. They're either making up for the shortcomings of the robot, or they're actually involved in actually controlling the robot itself. I kind of compare this a little bit to like animation. With animation, there's all these individual frames, but when you see them together, they look like movement. And actually, I think this is actually one of the tricks of robotics. If we're honest about this, that it's often the humans that are making the robot do the thing that we think it is, do the actual real work of making the robot real. I've worked on robots for a while, actually. This is one of the first robots I worked on. This was a robot called Tama. Tama was a little robot that could look at you. It had these little eyes. And so we were experimenting with using gaze to try and do kind of different sort of speech agents. And I did a lot of work on working out, how could a robot sort of simulate the kind of gaze behavior that we have in humans. But when it actually came to building the system, we hacked it. We pretty much just, you looked at the robot, it looked at you, and then that activated the robot. And since then, I've tried to take this more critical approach to human-robot interaction and to the behavior of robots. And I think it is important we realize that most of the time robots are pretty stupid and can't do much. In fact, I'd actually go as far to argue that robots, generally on the whole, are better thought of as objects rather than subjects. And actually, that's one of the problems with HRIs. Sometimes it gets those two little things confused. Yeah, so even though this is a really exciting time to be involved in robots, robots are really escaping the cage, I think this is also an important time to be critical about robots and what they actually can and cannot do. The talk I'm going to give you today is going to do some empirical work. I'm going to report on some work we've been doing looking at robots in real settings outside factories. And as I say, it's kind of part of this trying to develop a more critical perspective on robots and what they can do. I'm going to give you two examples. One of them is looking at self-driving cars, and the other one is looking at cleaning robots. And at the end, I'm going to come back and talk a little bit, I think, maybe about some new methods that we might draw on to have a look and understand and design human-robot interaction. With me so far? Cool. Let's keep going. So this work I did with my colleagues Matthias and Eric. And this was a kind of quite nice kind of a bit of work looking at the Waymo and Tesla self-driving cars. Now, if you work in this field, I'm sure you're kind of aware of these systems, but just in case, heaven forbid you aren't, the Waymo is the Google-initiated company that's had quite a bit of success with self-driving cars in certain cities in the US. And I actually think, it's kind of debatable whether a self-driving car is a robot. I actually think it is, and I think it's actually a very good example because it's probably one of the situations or modalities that's had the most money spent on it in terms of getting a robot to work successfully. And it's an incredible accomplishment. Having traveled in the Waymo cars, they really are quite something. But there's a problem. And if you follow it in any sort of depth, you'll know that the emergency services have made various complaints over the years about the situations where the Waymo cars cause trouble. So, for example, one case, they drove through police tape into a murder scene. Another one with a group of 8 Waymo cars all got confused and started chasing around after each other with their lights flashing, causing kind of problems in the cities that they're being trialed in. So this made us kind of interesting to look at what actually are the problems that these cars have. And one of the problems is a thing we call the halting problem. When they stop in the middle of the road and they block other road users. So let me give you some examples. There's a bit more details in the paper. The examples I'm going to use today actually come from this YouTuber who collected and still does collect some really diverse and interesting data around the use of the Waymo. There's some other data that we draw on in the paper as well. But I think it's really nice to give you a kind of example of what's going on here. So this is a Waymo. It's stuck on a road in the middle of the road here, and he's going to get roadside assistance. Waymo at that time couldn't remotely control the car, so they actually had to have people coming out to drive and to fix the car. And the car's just stuck on the road.
Oh, so how are we going to turn right when the right lane is closed off? What is the planner still wants to go in this lane?
So if you can sort of see, there's some cones here that's blocking the car. Cars are behind, and they actually start driving around the Waymo.
Air support.
Hey, I see there's some funky stuff going on here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yep, car stuck. The roadside assistants are coming on their way. He's looking round. You can see there's cars in the back, coming round, driving round it. It's stuck.
It's okay. There we go.
Car actually looks like it is on its way.
Oh, I don't think it was supposed to do that. Oh no. Oh
No, it
no.
actually did it pause. Did it pause again? It looks like it did.
Oh, now it's blocking the entire road.
And actually what happens is eventually a roadside assistance comes. The car then decides at that point that it's time to go, and the roadside assistance guy has to run down the road after the Waymo. So we call this halting problem, and it's, if you've worked with robots that move in public, you'll know this problem. Cars, robots halt on the road at inappropriate points, giving people puzzlement because they can't work out why the car is stopping. And I'm not doing a kind of a test of the Waymo. As I say, I think it's an incredible achievement. But I actually want to sort of think a little bit about what the fact that these vehicles stop tell us about traffic and driving, and also about what is some of the issues around how robotic systems, how computational systems work. Because stopping is not just a kind of safety critical operation that humans do when they're driving. It's part of interacting with other road users. You communicate by stopping. Actually, if you look at some of the kind of classic work that's done on road interaction, Penty and Mirka did this work on yielding, and that's kind of one of the big kind of puzzles that we've been looking at, is how to get robots, or cars in this case, to yield. Let's look at a second example. This is a Waymo car. Similarly, gets stuck in a different way, and we have a little bit issue where the passenger has to apologize. So it's a suburban Palo Alto street. The car's coming around. You can see it wants to go around the corner here. There's these little kids that are in little mini cars on the street, and you get this gesture. You can see they're in a bit better detail. You get this gesture, kind of come around. We're stopping for you.
Sorry, self-driving car. It sees you, so no worries about that.
So the car does get around the corner, and it does actually act safely in the situation. But it's not entirely smooth interaction. There's actually a 30-second pause there. And these kind of problems, while they might not be safety critical, they're bad driving, and they clog up the road. And this is one of the problems of the Waymos in the cities that is deployed. It's degrading driving for everybody else who has to drive. So the work, actually, of making the robot work isn't just the designers, it's everybody else just to live in that world and repair and pick up the work, the problems that these systems are creating. I think in terms of looking at this kind of work, you'll notice that I'm kind of taking this quite kind of sort of close attention to kind of the interaction there, and that's kind of my sociology training there. I think sequence is incredibly important for understanding robots and understanding how we design these interactions, is to think a lot about what happens after what. Because if something happens at the beginning of interaction, it can be different from what happens later on in the interaction after other things have happened. I also think pauses are very illustrative and kind of very interesting to kind of look at there. In human interaction, sometimes we do pauses. Sometimes we do pauses to indicate something in our communication. They're not just somehow, a fault or something gone wrong or safety critical maneuver. They're actually a way that we communicate whatever we're doing when we're talking. And that's an incredibly important, I think, way to think about when you want to look at the problems with robots when they stop and pause and halt, or have delays in their computation or whatever when they're in interaction. We use pauses to do things. And I think that can be a really useful way of thinking about how we should use pauses when when we're designing robots. Okay, so that's a kind of fun first example. You might kind of wonder, oh, like cars, are they really robots, Barry? I mean, yeah, I kind of see where you're going. So actually, for my second kind of piece, I want to talk about something that is, I think, unproblematically a robot, and that's some cleaning robots that we've been looking at. I think it's really quite odd in a way that of all the things that we've got robots to do outside the factories when they're out, the first thing we've got them to do is to clean. Isn't that kind of obvious thing for me why robots and cleaning go together? But yeah, I can kind of understand why. So we've been looking a little bit like cleaning robots, and particularly we've been doing some field work at Copenhagen Airport, which have some, they have deployed different floor cleaning robots there. And there's some really kind of interesting things going on there. There's some interesting teaming takes place between the staff and the robot. Often they'll go and clean the parts of the airport that the robot can't get into while the robot's cleaning the main floors. And I think this is kind of, there's this kind of nascent kind of work that's looking at robots in the wild, which we hope that this work can contribute to. But let's look at some cleaning robots and let's see what they do. So this is a bit of Copenhagen Airport. Have any of you here ever been in an airport? Yeah, I guess maybe some of you. You'll know that they're busy places. They're quite difficult places for anybody to navigate through, and they're particularly challenging for robots. So you'll see this halting that I've been talking about, can't you? The way that it's moving around, and then it's stopping, and it's like, why is it stopping? And when you see something moving and then stopping, why are you stopping? And then it stops again. And then it stops again, and it goes round the other way there. And this is one of the kind of challenges that people have when they come across this kind of cleaning robot is getting, like working out how to get around it, because it's a very big kind of physical thing, and it has this kind of troubles where like it'll often just get close to you and then stop, and then you've got to work out, well, how on earth am I going to get past this thing? It's the same problem as with the cars. It's yielding. How do we communicate? No, it's okay. You can go. I'm stopping, or we want to communicate. No. It's other way around. I'm going to go. You can stop. How do we do that interactionally? It turns out there's some bigger problems, though, with these cleaning robots. So particularly one of the problems is they just have no awareness of what's going on in an airport. One of the smaller cleaning robots, for example, it was kind of cleaning around while we were doing some field work, and a plane arrived at a gate, and it decided it would be a really good time to clean right outside the gate. And so there's this cleaning robot, and it's blocking the gate, and everyone's trying to get through. But how on earth could a robot be expected to understand the sociogeography of an airport and the fact that at certain times, certain places are going to be very busy, and other times they're not? Or this case here, where the robot decides it really wants to clean this cafe. So the person's filling up the refrigerator, there's some track there. So the robot goes out to give them a bit more room. And comes back again. And he's just not in the right place. There's just all these people here. There's this person trying to get around here, and then there's this huge robot, and it's kind of painful to watch. So actually, after this video as well, the robot comes around here and tries to clean in here and almost runs someone over, and it's just, it's... Now, I'm not critiquing this particular robot. It's a cleaning robot. It has kind of patterns that goes back and forth. But I'm just pointing out that it has no awareness of the scene. It has no idea that this is a busy cafe. Maybe this wouldn't be the best place to try and clean at that time. And pedestrian navigation, of course, is also kind of quite a difficult problem. And it seriously kind of has very little understanding of trajectories and people's movements. So in a sense, even though it is actually doing the job of cleaning, and it is successfully cleaning the airport, it's causing a lot of trouble in the process of doing that. Same thing as the car again. Who's picking up the pieces? Who's having to work around this? Not the designers of the robot, not even the people in the airport who run the robot, but people in the airport who have to find a way around it and get their way through. If you've worked on robots for a while, you'll have come across Moravec's paradox. It's comparably easy to make computers exhibit adult-level performance on intelligence tests, or playing checkers, or all these things LLMs can do, but much more difficult to give them the skills of a 1-year-old when it comes to perception and mobility. I don't know if Moravec was around many 1-year-olds, actually. I would say probably a 2-year-old, wouldn't you? So what does this mean for us as working in this area? As I say, this is a really exciting time, I think, to work in this area because these limitations are opportunities. It gives us a chance to actually kind of deal with these problems. How can we start to kind of go at dealing with those problems? And for me, as a sociologist, I see an opportunity because I think by studying and trying to look at these kind of interactions, I can work out like what things need to, maybe what things might be helpful to be done here. But the important thing is to look at interaction, and I think that's my arguments about where HRI needs to go. It needs to return back to thinking about interaction and looking at it in a little bit more than just passing detail. We need to move beyond tricks to try and conceptualize and think about what robots are doing better, to try and understand this kind of moment-by-moment unfolding interactions that make a robot work or crash into your cafe or airport gate. I've been arguing for an approach I call robo-pragmatics, which is a term that I've stolen from Kirsten Fisher, which is she sort of wants to take this analogy from pragmatics, which looks at how language is actually used, to try and understand, I think, how robots are actually used. And I think it's important to understand that while we are social, robots on the whole are not. They're things, they're clockwork, elaborate things, and that we need to focus on that and to try and get that understanding. And I think so much of the time, often we can end up getting confused and overcomplicating things by thinking, attributing human characteristics to robots. Generally, on the whole, they're pretty simple machines. I draw a lot on a field of sociology called ethnomethodology, which gives you a whole bunch of really kind of useful resources for thinking about and talking about human-robot interaction. And I've used a lot of these in my recent kind of work to try and think about and just sort of understand a little bit about what's going on in these interactions and why they go wrong or why at times they can go right. Also, along with Frank, who'll be talking next, we'll be doing some work with Frank and Wendy Ju, looking at trash can robots. Now, this work that Frank and Wendy did was so great. One of the things that's so nice about it is it uses a Wizard of Oz. So there's actually a human controlling this. And I actually think this is actually very useful because you actually get kind of behavior where the people on the other end are sort of understanding a little bit what's going on. But actually, I think even robot systems in the world, actually a lot of the time they are controlled by humans remotely. If you think about these self-driving cars, they're quite a lot of the time they're actually controlled by humans. So I think actually Wizard of Oz approaches are really powerful, not just for understanding, but actually because that's how commercial robots will actually often work. Oops. Yep, so just to sum up there, so what I've been trying to talk about here, trying to bring my history in human-computer interaction into thinking about HRI, to develop some new approaches to robot interaction. As I say, I draw on these concepts from ethnomethodology, and I'm really, you'll forgive me for taking this critical stance, but I think it's important we don't just get sort of carried away with the elixir of robots. If you work with robots and you design robots, you know just how limited they are. And it's time that we actually kind of acknowledge that and stop pretending they're just analogues of humans in any way whatsoever. Thank you. Also hiring a postdoc and a PhD student starting next year, so please get in touch.